Podcasting from a secret location deep inside the political colossus. This is Radio Free GOP, the voice of the Republican resistance.
Part of the beauty of me is that I'm very rich. Let me tell you, I'm a really smart guy.
What's your name again? John Miller. And you work with Canada? Yes, that's correct.
Oh my God, they've got a madman on their hands.
We will have no truce nor parley with you or the grisly gang who work your wicked will. You do your worst, and we will do our best.
We've come to a turning point, a moment for hard decisions. If not us, who? And if not now, when?
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the walls. The chair is against the walls.
This is Radio Free GOP with your host, Mike Murphy.
Yes, it's me, Mike Murphy, here on Radio Free GOP. Thank you for joining us. Well, the conventions have wrapped up. The Democrats have left Philly. What does it mean? What's the score? We're going to talk about that. And we have an interview, part of our Look Back at the Primary series, this time with the brain trust from the Ted Cruz campaign, Jeff Rowe and Chris Wilson. So that's very interesting, particularly for you nerds who like the history of what happened in the Republican primaries. And then a special surprise at the end. So lots in store. Thank you for clicking into the voice of the Republican resistance.
He used to have a big career, but now he's had enough. Podcasting's like therapy. His shrink says it's great stuff. Radio Free GOP.
Okay, convention scorecard. That's our topic. We're going to look at both conventions, particularly the Democratic one that just wrapped. What can I say? It was a slaughter. The Democrats ran a almost pitch-perfect convention from a messaging point of view, mostly because Donald Trump opened up the huge barn door of declaring that we live in a dark Gotham City of depression and despair. So the Dems were able to drive their entire convention right through that hole and make it a referendum on what the American idea is really all about. Are we a country that wants to be ruled by a single despot? I don't think so. I remember a certain Tea Party and a former king. Instead, we're a country of coming together in a democratic process to do things as a team. The Dems understood that, so they got the biggest prize of all, the ability to run a convention from a messaging point of view that often sounded like Ronald Reagan. That was the first big gift Donald Trump has given him, and I fear there may be more to come. The individual high points, well, there were a lot of them. Michelle Obama hit a home run. President Obama was persuasive. Bill Clinton did what he had to do. I thought it was a little wobbly, and he's older now. But he conveyed new information about her that I think will be helpful to swing voters, and he did his job. Mike Bloomberg, kind of my favorite speech. Now, Bloomberg's not Pericles the orator, but the content was really strong. And it hit ground zero of what we all know Trump's greatest nightmare is, being called out as a fake by a real billionaire. I just know Trump watched that thing glued to his screen, howling Rosebud time and time again and reaching for a teddy bear that Fred Trump took away from him a long, long time ago. Fred Trump, he owns a little bit of the blame for this whole thing. If I had a time machine, I would change my plan. I would not go back and find baby Hitler. I'd find Fred Trump and tell him, don't be such an asshole to your kid. We're all going to pay a price for it later. Anyway, you can tell that Trump was bothered by all this by the tweets and the barrage of press statements afterward. The cons, that impressive moment with that grieving father holding up a copy of the Constitution, that proud immigrant, it struck a chord with the country and a dark chord with Donald Trump. He responded in true Trumpian thuggish style by attacking the guy's wife, a Gold Star mother. Then there was the back and forth on television and the Sunday morning show where he couldn't admit he really knew what the word sacrifice meant. He said he sacrificed by creating jobs. We have seen the worst Trump during the last 48 hours that we've seen from the beginning. And I have to think it's starting to resonate with the country. You can see it resonating with Trump. He's scared. He's got that look in his eye. He's on the scratching, clawing, growling defensive. It'll be interesting to see if Trump can right his ship or not. But right now, no doubt, these conventions, Democrats scored a big hit. What'll it mean going forward? Well, we're going to have polls by Wednesday, Thursday, and we'll talk a lot about those next week on the podcast. An idea I've had for a few months, and I've said a few times publicly to some ridicule, still could hold water. Namely that Trump is a powder, and he's a guy who's built this phony brand based on winning. All those things are in jeopardy if he has week after week after week of bad polling. I don't think it's impossible that he'll pull the plug. That he'll just make up some excuse about a conspiracy is out to get him, or Reince Priebus didn't make the right phone call, or whatever it is. He'll blame the party. He'll blame anybody but himself, and he'll just drop out of the race. Now, on one hand, it's a crisis. The logistics of that are quite complicated. I'll talk about them in a future podcast if it happens. But on the other hand, then the Orange Menace is gone. I'm actually not that pessimistic, even if Trump stays in, about the down ballot stuff. We have a lot of folks in tough races, particularly in the Senate. But Trump's connection to the Republican Party is becoming so tenuous, and it's becoming such an obvious part of the dialogue that many Republicans are embarrassed and uncomfortable with him. I think if the polling starts to show as the race goes farther that Hillary is likely to be the president, more and more people may rally to the Republican Senate candidates as a counterbalance because she has her own downside and the country is well aware of it. So this is a very different year, and I think some of the rules about landslide wipeout at the top means a landslide wipeout down the ticket may this time not be true. We're only going to find out on Election Day, but I guarantee you this, the next 100 days, they're not going to be dull. All in all, to sum up, it was a very successful convention. There was one off-key point, though. There was one poorly written speech, unfortunately, for the Democrats, written by a speechwriter that can't be fired. And I'm talking about Hillary Clinton's speech. Sure, it linked into all the big themes of the convention, and it had a few great one-liners that became sound bites, particularly how somebody being easily baited by tweets shouldn't have nuclear weapons. I think that's going to be a growing theme. We'll probably see the old Daisy Girl spot updated with Twitter. But it was clunky. It was poorly written. Hillary Clinton has limited speech delivery skills, but a well-written speech is a way to pull a so-so deliverer up to a higher performance. And this thing was a train wreck of clunky transitions and policy wonkdom and a bunch of liberal bones thrown out to the Sanders people unnecessarily that I think shut down the good message the convention was sending disaffected Republicans. We were back to Mausuit stuff, and that is not the way to build the bigger coalition. So did she ruin her chances? Did she throw the election to Trump with such a clunky speech? No, it was just not nearly what it could have been. I think they could have had a neck breaker of a speech if she had grabbed the larger themes and the American optimistic dog whistle and ran with that rather than going to the lefty laundry list, which reminds Republicans and conservative independents that the ideological risk of Hillary Clinton is in itself a daunting thing. So missed opportunity. Convention was still a plus for them. It's going to move numbers. I believe you'll see her pull ahead and maintain a lead for a while. We'll have polling next week we can analyze here on the podcast. But all in all, that was the one thump. I talked to some senior Democrats afterward, and I checked my theory that the reason the speech was so clunky was that it was written by the one speechwriter that can't be fired, and they grunted affirmation. In fact, I hear the speech was being rewritten right up until she gave it, and many of the speechwriting staff who worked on it collapsed, exhausted, into happy piles, knowing it could have been, and it nearly was, a lot worse. So, all in all, the Battle of the Conventions, big for the Democrats. And how do we know it worked? Donald Trump's gone even crazier than usual. The last 48 hours since the Democratic convention has ended has been one asinine tweet or stupid attack after another. You can tell his unhinged factor is going off the scale. First, he denied he had anything to do with his own convention. The minute the reviews turned, I just showed up to perform at the end. What is he, the Oak Ridge Boys? No, it was his convention from the beginning. It just shows the psychotically thin skin this guy has. Again, we got a lunatic running for president as our nominee, and increasingly the pressure is going to be on Republicans to say something about it. This is becoming worse and worse, and there will be repercussions. People are going to wear this thing forever, and it is going to be a time here in the next 10 to 20 days where I think Republican voices are going to have to say more.
Mike Murphy, podcasting sanity, Radio Free GOP.
Well, guess what? We got some advertisers. I don't have the live read ad yet. We're going to start with the next podcast. We have some details to do, so I can't really name the people yet. We're still working out which of our secret bank accounts to wire the $27 to. But thanks to our friends at Ricochet.com, we're joining up with their ad network. All I can tell you is this. Don't go crazy buying any razor blades at high prices right now, okay? Take a hint. More to come next week. But there are other ways you can help pay the electric bill around here at the Radio Free GOP podcast. One, you can go to our site, radiofreegop.com, and click the little Amazon button. Snarky Ginger did that. She tweeted about it. And what happens is, when you do it, you buy stuff just like normally on Amazon, but we get a tiny taste. As they say in Philadelphia politics, we get our beak wet. So, go out, buy something irresponsibly expensive on Amazon. Just click to our site, radiofreegop.com, click the Amazon button. You pay the same price. We get a little bit of money. Also, our T-shirts, they're hot. They're the talk of Milan and Paris. They're shipping out everywhere. We have them in classy blue or rebellious white with our upside-down elephant in distress logo, the official Radio Free GOP T-shirt. It is a hot item, and they're shipping out. You can order yours now on the website. And we now have on the website a PayPal button. You click it, we get 99 cents, or at least part of it, after the credit card companies are done, or $1.99. You can throw a few shekels in the pot that way if you like. Now, back to the podcast.
Fight for sanity. Sanity. In this crazy year. On Radio Free GOP.
Okay, we have our interview with the Cruise High Command, but first we're going to do something new here. This will be a regular, but every once in a while we see something that deserves a little bit of attention. We call them really, really good angry tweets.
Angry tweets. Why can't they learn to spell? On Radio Free GOP.
So we're kicking off with only one angry tweet because it's such a prize winner. It comes from the Orange Menace himself, who wrote, Hillary Clinton should not be given national security briefings in that she is a loose cannon. I think he meant to say loose, but he couldn't spell it. Forgot an O. With extraordinarily bad judgment and instincts. Yes, Donald, there is an N in instincts. Well, it's not an unlegitimate criticism. I think some of her foreign policy judgment has been bad. Then again, I think all of Trump's judgment has been bad. So my solution, give them both fifth grade maps of the world as a security briefing. Hillary will be pissed. Trump won't really know it's not a security briefing. He'll probably fax it to Putin and buy some time that way, national security establishment. Let's not give either of these people sharp knives. Not yet. So that's it. Our first prize-winning angry tweet.
Angry tweets. Why can't they learn to spell? On Radio Free GOP.
I think it's pretty clear I'm not a huge Ted Cruz fan. I didn't like the shutdown. I don't like the crazy stuff. I don't believe the missing millions theory. But I'll tell you this. I know what a well-run campaign looks like. And they ran a good, well-run campaign in that primary. And they came in second. So I thought, let's hear from them. Let's do a little bit of a look back at the Cruz campaign. So I was in Cleveland at our Radio Free GOP secret podcasting headquarters at the fabulous Harbor Inn Bar. I lured over Chris Wilson, an old friend who was head of polling and analytics for the Cruz campaign, where they did a lot of innovative stuff, and Jeff Rowe, a veteran Republican brawler, up-and-coming consultant who was Cruz's campaign manager. We went and we discussed kind of the primary and the convention and the chances of Donald Trump. Now, this was taped a few days before Cruz gave his big speech. I had no inkling he wasn't going to endorse, or I would have had a few questions about that. We did talk about the speech a little off mic when we were having a couple of cheeseburgers, and they were cagey, but I could see working through what to do. It still shocked me they went as far as they did, or at least Ted did, with that proclamation. So this, I think, doesn't address that, but it does give you an idea of what the world looked like from the Cruz High Command as they navigated from 4 or 5% at the beginning, a very fractious and difficult Republican primary. I hope you enjoy.
It's time to ask some questions and go behind the scenes. Here's our latest interview. We'll try to keep it clean. Radio Free GOP.
So how'd you get into this racket? Jeff, we'll start with you.
I grew up in a small town and applied to go to West Point. and met my congressman at the time in that process and thought he was like the smartest guy I'd ever met. They could ask him a question and he knew the answer to everything. He's still alive.
Yeah, who was that?
It was Tom Coleman.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And he
Missouri legend, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
he was it. And so met him, thought it was awesome. And my grandmother was active in politics a bit. My family wasn't very political, but she would take me to fundraisers and things like that. She was a Republican women's club. That kind of got the bug. I went to join the Army, National Guard, served for a little bit, came back, and started writing a political column in this local newspaper in my college, which is Northwest Missouri State University. And I wrote a couple columns, and the place like blew up. I wrote about abortion, and Clinton was president. I wrote about NAFTA, and his foreign policy experience was trading chickens with Louisiana was one of my lines. And so they started editing my columns, and then they started making me turn them in early so they could do a response editorial. That kind of got the bug, and so I went to work for a local state rep. He won. He ran for Congress in 2000, so I went to a D.C., was there for 6 years, and then started my own company 10 or 11 years ago.
In the Army, you were in the heavy artillery business, so large projectiles that explode is not new to you.
That's right. Having a 10-man crew that you fire a gun with, but only have 5. Mm-hmm. So that's a lesson that you learn in politics pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it was a 155 howitzer unit. So, yeah, it was a good experience for that, and pig farming was a good experience for politics. And
you just recently completed, what was your title at Cruz? Were you the campaign manager?
Yep.
And Chris, how about you? We've known each other a while because in the polling world, but how'd you get into this?
It's I was thinking it through while Jeff was talking about it. It's sort of a similar story. I grew up in a small town in the southwest corner of Oklahoma, grew up playing basketball, and went to college my first year to try and play basketball. Realized I sucked and needed to figure something else out to do with my life. And I saw a movie called St. Elmo's Fire. And the head guy in that was a political consultant who was going to Georgetown. I thought, that looks kind of cool. I should look into that. And I actually ended up applying to Georgetown. Didn't get in immediately. Ultimately did. And studied economics while I was out there. Focused on predictive econometrics with the Soviet Union. And I graduated. And a month later, the Soviet Union collapsed. So I had to figure out something else to do.
Those
in this
bastards.
World. I know.
Ruined your whole
what
plan.
else was I going to do? But from that, I started being out in D.C., worked on a couple of campaigns. In 89, a governor's race we lost, and then ran a PAC in 1990, and then went to work for Tom Cole, who's now a congressman, but at the time was a pollster back in Oklahoma, and he sort of taught me polling, and the rest is history. I've been doing it since.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I was the $1 a year. I'm so old, but I was the $1 a year guy at the Congressional Committee, and Tom came in as ED, and I got to work with him, and he's a superstar and a good member of Congress too. We could use a few more like him. So when Senator Cruz took a look at this thing at the beginning and decided to run, who did you guys think the real competition would be in your lane, kind of, to build your base in the party? Were you worried about Huckabee making a comeback, or was it Marco who kind of had one foot in that lane and one foot in the regular lane? How did you guys see the race, a year ago?
Carson, I think, was probably our foremost problem. When Ted first announced, let's just take the day before he announced, and you word clouded what people said about him. It was Tea Party firebrand, period. That was it. There's no evangelical, no Christian, no nothing. That was it. He was Tea Party guy. And so essentially our launch changed that to a degree by launching Liberty. And the narrative started then, and then we knew we had to survive a bunch of people coming in after us with their announcements. But we viewed it, we viewed it through 4 buckets, like everybody else, with the evangelical and Tea Party, libertarian and moderate. And, the Tea Party lane Rick Perry had a foot in that. Mm-hmm. Now, in the last campaign, he tried to broaden out, and so it was going to be more complicated for him to be a pure Tea Party guy. Rand Paul was going to make a play over there. Marco would throw some weight that way. But I think really in the evangelical lane, Huckabee and Santorum had really kind of fizzled in between. I think you can tell a lot between a campaign when they run again, what they've done in between to really grow and build their profile and brand. And we didn't feel like they had really done that. So everybody's a problem in a presidential race, but Bobby Jindal took off in the summer in Iowa and spent a lot of time
there. Yeah, he had a little moment where,
he had a window.
And the
there.
Andersons would run that campaign too. That they'd go to that Christian right base and start there.
Yeah, he went from, we were polling routinely. Went from 2 to 7 pretty quickly. Spent about $5 million between he and the super PAC. Made a play. I think he just kind of ran out of runway in a way. But I think
this happens to a lot of of candidates where they decide to get started, they got to buy some polling data early by going up on television. Then they find out all the finance promises they were made by their hometown guys don't come true, and they die of starvation before the thing really starts. That is a very frequent occurrence.
Right. And it's a dangerous trap to get into. I mean, we almost got in that position before the first debate. There was a chance we weren't going to make the first debate. We weren't ninth on the stage. And how are you trying to move your national numbers 3 points? You know,
right,
good luck
impossible,
with that. By National Fox. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah, or get a reality show on television.
Right.
We didn't consider that as a possibility. It's
Hope the 11 people in Idaho that are going to pick up the phone call are going to, be for you after watching your ad 2 times. So the book is actually what saved us on that. Ted wrote a book, and the New York Times placed us in the first debate because they blacklisted us and wouldn't put us on the New York Times bestseller list. And we got 10 days out of that and 5 points.
Right,
and that
noise alone, because
that locked us in the debate.
This is something people not in the business don't really always understand about polling. These early polls, these horse race polls in a primary, are noise meters. I mean, literally, if you can fall down the stairs right and get on television for 2 days, it can buy you 5 or 6 points, and all of a sudden you're on the debate stage. Yep. I thought the polling debate thing was kind of crazy. They should have had a better calculus. Polls should have been part of it.
Yeah, I think so too. But it is really, a really poor way to run a railroad.
Yeah,
is to have it where it's only poll driven, and we benefited from it. But the calculations that we were making as they were changing the rules in the process, it's really impactful. And so we'd studied a lot of campaigns and what happens. No campaign gets out because, they want to stop having people tell them how great they are. They get out because their path is over or they run out of money.
Yeah, they get choked out by money, and they're often connected because the money follows the buzz of your path.
Yep.
And because everybody burns through their easy. I mean, Walker's the case study of that. He had all the hype in the world. On paper, he was really formidable. I mean, I took him very seriously as a candidate, but when, the fundraising is always a projection. The spending is always a cash reality. And when you're hoping for fundraising while you spend, guess what happens? You run out of dough and die.
So we viewed Carson in that bucket pretty well. And then Walker came out of the gate in February at the Iowa event.
Right. He had
Family
a big
Leader event
moment then.
And he sat atop the polls for a long time off of that moment. And I think probably in a way kind of hurt him because he had to start so big.
Yeah. And then they backfilled a machine to do that, and then they couldn't afford it.
And then you can't. I remember the day that Rick Perry got all the shit for cutting staff. Right? They go through. They just don't let you die. Like they've got to painfully report every step of your demise. And so Perry had 8 staff in Iowa, and he knocked it down to 1. Bob House, who's a great guy.
A great guy, yeah.
And he was doing it for free, I think, if he'd admit it.
He was probably a donor.
Yeah, right. He probably donated his own salary, and so I called our guy at the same day that he was getting so much shit. And all these reports about how many people they had on the ground and all that. We never played any of that. I mean, that's a really private information. That's to be as confidential as you can. I tried to hide staff instead of boast about how many you have.
Well, it sets expectations and
Yeah, and it's supposed to be some measurement of how good you are when it has no measurement. It's actually oftentimes counter-cyclical to what it actually should be. But anyway, he went from 8 people to 1. We had 1 person in Iowa that day. And he had started out, because he was such on fire coming out of the last race and, he had his moment. And I think a lot of people just realize, and we set this up. This is not, Jeff Miller's a good guy and I know him and all that. These are tough decisions everybody has to make. But we started out the campaign with a $15 million budget and 17 full-time staff. And we lived until Labor Day with 30 staff. Now, everything sucked. Right. Like the printers don't work and the phones are jacked up.
Yeah, but you survive, which is 2/3 of this game.
That's right. And you have money to put actually lead on the target and direct voter contact. And everything else is kind of, everything else is just kind of getting to the point where you can do that. So that means Ted's on a Southwest airplane. We're not flying.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to have a candidate that's got the stamina for that.
Yeah, it is an endurance thing. Lamar Alexander tells a story about what's it like when he ran in 95 and he came really close in New Hampshire after being at 1% for a year. He said it's like jogging through a 20-mile desert to make 1 3-point shot in basketball and rimming the ball.
Oh, that's funny.
I remember I think it was the Dole 88 campaign. It was bad. He was in Illinois. It was about to fold, and he wasn't going to make it. And they asked him, they caught him with a microphone at the tarmac getting off his plane in Springfield after they'd laid off a bunch of staff. Senator Dole, you've done a staff layoff. And Dole's like, running a campaign, not a jobs program. I always loved Bob Dole. every campaign has what I call the white whale voter, which is why aren't we getting more? They should be for us. In the Cruz world, what was the vote you thought you should be getting more of, at least at the beginning, that just wasn't going there? Like, we always thought we should do better with people who said foreign policy was number one, because Jeb was kind of a grown-up and had a plan. We had all the endorsements, and we did okay, but we didn't do quite what we thought we should. And we were always kind of chasing those people, scratching our head. Was there an elusive group where, like, we're underperforming with?
Well, I think there's two answers to that. One is what was reported, and then one was what actually occurred. And the interesting aspect of moving out of Iowa, where we won, and into New Hampshire, where I actually believe we exceeded expectations, did better than we thought we'd do internally, and then we moved into South Carolina. And South Carolina had this image of being a heavy evangelical state, a southern state, a conservative state, one that we should have played for. And I think that narrative continued into Super Tuesday regarding evangelicals. And what we found is there's really two very different types of evangelicals. There are those that go to church once a week or more. And there are those who define themselves as evangelicals, may only go to church a couple times a year. Now, that's going to vary state by state, but particularly in South Carolina, when we look at the districts and we were in trying to grow our support base there, what we found is there was sort of a social evangelical, if you will. It was more of they'd moved in from the East Coast, somewhere north, a little bit north of the Mason-Dixon line, and they defined themselves as an evangelical because that's what they had to do to get into their local country club. But when it came down to us communicating with them and appealing to them in the same way that maybe we might have done in Iowa, it was a different type of voter. We won almost overwhelmingly those voters who defined themselves as evangelical and went to church once a week or more. The ones that we lost with, and that frankly Trump probably exceeded expectations with, was those who didn't go to church, went to church less than once a week.
Yeah, so they carried an evangelical self-opinion, but they weren't living the more traditional evangelical life.
Well, I don't know.
In terms of church attendance, only that.
And that was really what it crossed
dynamic.
with, was church attendance.
Right.
And so we defined those, and really what you could find, there was a direct correlation with Tea Party voters and evangelicals. And so we labeled those people internally evangelical activists, those evangelical traditionalists trying to move them and bring them closer to us. And it was a different issue per state, and we did well with them. And I think from a stand, we were able to grow, but it was we were never able to.
You wanted to own them.
And we needed to. We needed to going into Super Tuesday, and that was one of the areas where probably Donald Trump being in the race hurt us just as much as anyone else.
One of the weird Trump factors is how he was able to play in every bucket. He didn't always dominate, but like he would exist in the bucket you guys were in, and he'd exist in the regular Republican bucket too. And under the normal rules of gravity, you're not supposed to be all things to all people, but his weird Trumpian persona and his fame, being the TV star, the famous guy that the media gave so much attention to, really kind of bent gravity a little bit by the traditional rules. And that was a surprise to us and not unfrustrating.
Right.
Yeah. And if you look at the way in which he was this sort of winning persona, and I think there was an attitude we had coming out of Iowa that was turned on its head a little bit because of the way that it happened. But we felt like he had this image that he was going to win, and whenever he lost Iowa, we really believed that could create a catapulting event, but it didn't. He was able to recover and move into
he took
New
that
Hampshire.
punch and kept going.
He really did.
It's just some of the normal rules of, wait a minute, the wooden stake is in the Dracula. What? Why is he still moving? This was the year that was weird. Now, speaking of Iowa, I had one last Iowa question. We spent a fair amount of attention keeping an eye on our friend from Florida, Marco Rubio, from, of course, in Jeb world. Marco was interesting in that his campaign in Iowa was different than his campaign everywhere else. He kind of caught on there, but it struck me he was really moving right into your kind of lane, while over in other places he was not. Did that surprise you to have Marco kind of show up? And he was doing some real business there for a while.
I think that the way, as it turned out, it was a pretty smart strategy. I didn't appreciate it at the time.
Right.
And I think they didn't structure the campaign very well to take advantage of it when it did happen. But we'd been tromping around in that state for like 70 days, and he'd been there 20.
Yeah.
And so he actually got the benefit. We weren't stale, but we were going to war with Donald. On January 4th, everybody suited up, got the knives out, and started, we turned almost 100% of our advertising against Trump.
Now, was that always the plan? Because at the beginning, it was kind of friendly. Because my guess from the outside was that you guys were betting that Donald would tie himself up with masking tape and screw up and implode, and you wanted his voters.
That's right.
So, but then he did the rude move of not leaving.
That's right. Yeah. When you have a strategy based on what somebody else does, it's kind of a
you're screwed. Yeah. But you try to make the best guess at the moment.
Yeah. And fighting with him when we're at 3% made no sense to us.
Right.
And particularly when he's saying some of the things that we say. And he's saying things that we want to say that he's saying better than we're saying it.
Right.
So,
you can't fight on issues because you agree. Yeah.
So drafting on it was good. But so, we come out of January 4th, we're up 9, and he starts the Canada stuff. And he starts unloading on us. And so we get into a point where I think we're at one point we're down 5. Yep. And then we just said, okay, 100% towards him. Let's just make this a war zone. So we did, and then we got back up, right side up, pretty quickly. And they just hadn't heard any bad information about us until Donald started kind of poking aggressively. He then doesn't go to the debate, and then Rubio spends what had never been done. He had never done more than 3 events in a day. That was because he did so much fundraising. I think he's not a lazy guy, obviously. Mm-hmm. But they were doing 5 and 6 events a day. And he actually had they had no ground, but he was like the new kind of cool toy that was there at the right time.
Yeah, and it's a big deal in any primary, but in a caucus to be the right guy at the late moment there.
At the late moment, and when the two of us and Trump are just trying to take each other's heads off.
Yeah.
And so he got no attention from either of us. We did that's not completely fair. At the end, we were against Marco as well. In the debates, we were taking harder swings, and particularly the debate where Trump wasn't in it. So Marco got in our lane. He started advertising evangelical. He did a really nice ad.
I remember some of the policy positions, too, he was taking.
Yep.
No exceptions, that kind of stuff.
Yep, and he was drifting over there. But, he took himself back out of that pretty quickly after Iowa. That was the unique place where he tried to really run as a conservative.
And we wanted him to pay a price for that. Yeah. In the later primaries where we were very much in competition with him, New Hampshire, other places. So, right. And then also he had the issue with immigration, and we kept the heat on him on that because he used to be where we were, and then he had a conversion. So we thought, all right, well, we have the standing there to see where he really is. Just kind of walk me through from the inside of the Cruz effort the last 60 days of the race.
The last 60?
Yeah, after South Carolina.
Okay, yeah. We go in Nevada. Nevada's bad for us too. We lost South Carolina and Nevada by a total of 3,500 votes. When I say lost, got out of second place.
Right.
And so now we got to win Texas. The next day after Nevada, Rubio's super PAC puts down $3 million against us in Texas. Trump comes in with $1 million in Texas. We've already laid our advertising down. We've spent $10 million on Super Tuesday.
And how's your cash on hand at that point? Probably a little strained, right?
No, it's okay.
You had some, but...
we were okay. We were about $16 million in the bank.
Got it.
We were spending 10 that day, though.
Right, sure.
We'd always planned on spending 10. So we had a real decision to make, and the decision to make was, are we going to try and win these states that we've been bragging about winning for a long time, or talking about being able to win, or are we going to separate ourselves from Rubio before he takes us over? Right. And so we did about 20% of our advertising was for us, and that was in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Minnesota, and Alaska, where we did positive Cruz. And the balance of the $7 million was mostly against Rubio, some against Trump, trying to keep Marco under the delegate threshold in these states. And he was going all in Virginia.
Yeah.
He was going all in Tennessee. He was going more in than I would have thought he would have been in Georgia. And he was making a play in Minnesota, which he eventually won.
In Oklahoma, too. He went heavy Oklahoma.
And he was playing in Arkansas.
That's right. Yep.
In Arkansas. So what he was doing was what he was trying to recreate the South Carolina play, which is advertise late and take all the endorsements of all the major governors, senators. And he was getting them all. And so we knew if that continued and the delegate, because we thought all along, there was a chance we were going to convention. So we always had the delegate. Our first delegate meeting was June 1st of last year, where we first said, okay, we need to start putting these people on the record that they're for us make them eventual delegates and start running them through the process. I mean,
you guys knew that the turf of the process to choose the delegate bodies who then carry the vote, if it became an open convention, a gold thing to have, was important, and that takes time and investment, and that's why if we had an open convention here, I bet you have 800 or 900 people, more than anybody else.
Yeah, I think the pros cruise contingent is all of that anyway. Yeah. So we were successful. Marco misses the threshold by like less than 1 or 2 points and all over the place.
Yeah.
And so the delegate count really, and we won 2 states outside of Texas,
right?
Which is a big night. So now we kind of got our feet back underneath us. Now we're going to the 15th, and the 15th. So I've said this publicly already. It's hard to like admit over and over again, but I'll do it another time for you. Is we were playing in 3 states. We had Missouri, Illinois, and North Carolina. North Carolina and Missouri are proportional. So
yeah.
But you got a winner-take-all, pretty good winner-take-all component. And we're in play in both states. And Illinois is a delegate fight, delegate count.
They still have
CD.
the old-school delegate thing where you have to file your people and everything.
It's a
grind.
State for that. So the in between there, we had the 2nd through the 14th. We had some caucuses where we did well, and we had some states that had performed well for us. But the big day was the 15th, and so Kasich wins Ohio as expected. Rubio loses Florida as expected. At that point, expected. Yeah. And then we make this decision. Well, not we. I keep on saying we because I want some cover in this. But I made a decision on Friday night after the riots in Chicago to stay with a full day of activity in Illinois because there's about 20 delegates at play.
Yeah, and you're swinging for the fences there because you've got proportional in other places. Yeah.
So we win. So our goal, we need to win a state. We wanted to win a state that night. And then do better than expected in Illinois, and we really thought we had a shot. And we did a poll, which is Saturday,
Yeah.
Sunday poll. We get what you pay for on that. But we stuck with the Monday schedule. We did all day Saturday in Missouri. We did 4
What did the
stops.
poll say? What were the numbers on the?
It was
weekend polling is a nightmare because you don't know if you can believe it or not.
That's right.
And so if it's good news, you don't trust it. If it's bad news, you think, well, it could be better than this.
It showed that we thought the riots might have a negative impact. I remember that was the discussion Jeff and I had.
On Cruz, they would help Trump.
We thought it would hurt Trump. We thought
because Trump is the guy who's creating a world where we got riots at Republican events.
This is finally going to be, people are going to see this, all right, too much. But he
didn't go there, so he stayed out.
Right. But it had the opposite effect.
They rallied to Trump, punish the lawbreakers.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so to your point about weekend polling, it's like, oh, well, it can't be that bad.
Yeah.
And so it moved like 4.5 points. We were like outside the margin in a lot of these collar counties in Illinois. If we would have gone to Missouri, we would have won. Missouri, that's a 42 delegate swing.
Or North Carolina. If we'd gone to North Carolina.
So this is every campaign has a time machine, issue. If you could go back in time, you would have played the Illinois-Missouri thing differently.
Way different.
Yeah.
We was split. Knowing what I know now, that's an easy decision. But even knowing what I know now, it was the wrong decision.
Right, I see what you're saying. Yeah, but again, if I had a time machine, look out Hitler's baby, or baby Hitler. If I had a time machine, look out Hitler baby. You can beat yourself up to death. I mean, I can think of a lot of things we could have done differently, but I'm not sure it would have changed the outcome.
Although, so that's specifically,
that's one where you're,
all the things that come into it, which is where campaigns are about, which is why we had a pretty good culture here. That we have backups. We have Jason Johnson, who's our chief strategist, who was on the road with the boss, and he was there. We have all these kind of backup. Mark Campbell, who's from Illinois. Our political director, like he's in Houston, like how many hours are you getting to sleep? Like we're trying to do all these things to not make mistakes.
Yeah.
And
that's the part of this people miss is when they scale up, the operational staff at the top normally can't scale up because you can't train up people quick enough.
Yep.
And you're already exhausted from 200 days straight. Yeah. And all of a sudden everything gets 3 times as hard when you're barely keeping it together physically and mentally to begin with.
And we had one senior staff the whole time. We started with those people we started with, that was senior staff, and then we just had their support. There was no, call the IT guy to fix your computer. Like, call Geek Squad and figure it out yourself.
Speaking of geeks, let me pivot a little bit. You guys did a lot of interesting stuff on the data side, Chris. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and what you think you did differently from other campaigns, or at least what was the most effective? Because, data's a catchphrase that people kind of oversell a little bit.
Right.
And for its own sake is kind of silly, but when it is properly utilized, it's an incredibly powerful tool.
It can be. I'll tell you, the history of the use of predictive modeling and data goes back. The first time I built a predictive model was in 2010 for Mike Lee when he was challenging Bob Bennett in the convention in Utah, and we built a model for a potential lead delegate, recruited them to turn out, and we won. And then the second model I ever built was 2 years later when Orrin Hatch hired me to undo whatever the hell I'd just done for Mike Lee. But we also built some models that year for Ted Cruz in the runoff against David Dewhurst. So that's 2012. We built one model for them, but the Romney campaign in their modeling operation built 2 voter segmented predictive models. So they give you an idea. So in 2012, 2 voter segmented predictive models built to segment the electorate. In 2014, for Greg Abbott, I did his analytics running for governor of Texas. $50 million we spent. We built 8 voter segments. So we had a 400% growth between 12 and 8. So you go from 2 on the presidential campaign, 8 on a governor's race in Texas. In Iowa, we had 167 voter segments built by predictive models. By Super Tuesday, we had 845. And by the day we dropped out on May 3rd, we built 1,809 different voter segments.
Wow, yeah, no, that's a very large universe.
And so it shows you the growth of modeling. That's
right.
all been.
We have so much more data now.
You do. You have more data on both online and offline, third party, second party, first party in this case. But it's really, what's allowed us to do it is Moore's Law, the growth of computing, and the fact that we don't need to have a basement full of servers anymore. And that Mike Lee model, it literally took a week to run, and we weren't able to use we had to stay off email because we didn't want to screw up our server. Now we just use Amazon Web Servers to do it.
I was going to ask if you were Azure or Amazon AWS.
We're actually splitting between both, and I really do like a lot of the new Power BI and some of the other Microsoft utilities that they're making open source. It's making them competitive from a standpoint of our ability to use this. But I think what we did that was probably different than what anybody else did, because anyone could have built these models, I think was the application of it. I really give Jeff credit for this, and I shouldn't say this in front of him, but it is, when the first day I showed up, I'm like, who's our digital person? And he's like, well, it's driven off data, so you are. I'm like, no, seriously, who's really going to do this? And I think I refused to do it for a couple of weeks, and then he showed me he was serious and wasn't going to hire anyone, and we finally, I buckled down and did it, and we ultimately did bring in an excellent digital director in John Thompson, but the application of taking the data and applying it through targeting on the digital basis, be it social, be it search, be it display, be it video, I think it's what had never been done at the volumes and the levels we did before. And I mentioned that Iowa example where we had those 167 models. Now, some of those were models built for the purposes of not talking about something, or things that we wouldn't talk about. Like Senator Cruz was the first person to be against ethanol subsidies to win the state of Iowa, but we need to know who that really pissed off,
right? So
that we didn't go talk to them about that.
So you can shatter conventional wisdom with data to really know what the score is.
That's true, and you can. But the difference we had was not just using it from digital, but we used it for voter contact. We used it to drive an app. We used it to for door to door. We used it for every application of the campaign, right down to scheduling. And again, I give Jeff credit for having the vision to do that, because it was an application of data that I know I had never been involved with before, and it was a culture that required its use on every single decision.
Yeah, you have to go all in and make the dollar commitment early before you see any return on it.
And I think in most campaigns it ends up getting siloed. Oh, those are the data geeks over there, and let them, every once in a while we'll let them come to a meeting, but try and keep them to themselves.
What was the deal with your super PACs? There were a couple of them. I couldn't understand if that were like rich guys who wanted to have their own super PACs and didn't get along well, or there was some secret strategy to it I couldn't figure out. I know you guys couldn't communicate with your super PACs, but looking back, what was the bottom line? Was one more effective than the other? Or just generally, I'll just ask, your super PACs, what was the story with the multiple super PACs?
Well, I don't think anyone would ever start out the campaign to set it up the way they did it.
Yeah.
We really, though, what happened, to be frank about it, is we launched our campaign 3 months before we intended to, because we were concerned about piling into the race late. And so we jumped the line, went on March 23rd, a week before a reporting deadline, like all the things you don't do before a major holiday.
Right, sure.
All the things you don't do. And so I don't know that they were all prepared, but I don't think you would set it up that way. But it was a lot of individual large donor money that have different priorities and principles. And so I think it allowed them to focus on what they do well and what they want to do. And I'm not sure about that. I've never even unpacked this, but here's what I can tell you from my view of it. We had one super PAC that was completely based on ground game, staffing and events. They would host events for us. They would build out staff that we could convert to campaign staff. The wall doesn't go that way, so they could come over that afternoon.
Right.
And they did collateral. We didn't buy a yard sign in this campaign. I'm fundamentally against yard signs.
Yeah. I like negative yard signs. I used one in 88 in a congressional race, and I thought, okay, I found a yard sign. I can believe it.
Right. So then we had one that was just doing digital advertising. That was very helpful. Then we had one that was doing kind of radio, conservative outreach, and then we had one that was doing TV. I think.
So in theory, there was some elegance to it, though.
Oh,
also the risk they trip over each other tremendously.
I think they probably had some communication, gaps that they had to fill in. But from my perspective, we swapped emails together and made about $1 million off the emails that we swapped. We had that constant. We had signs and rallies and groups coming out, and then we had TV when we needed it. So I was pleased with their effort. It looked clunky. I'm sure it was clunkier. When things in politics look clunky, they're a lot worse than they probably are.
Right.
As far as clunkiness.
Witness Trump campaign right now. The great Walinda on a tightrope, and we're hearing him splatter to the floor at any minute. Yeah.
But the point is, from the perspective that we had, every super PAC had a real value. They all did a really nice job, and they were all there when we needed them and had the right strategy.
If you've got a donor who says, I'm going to give a couple million, but I want to have my own super PAC because I like green hats, not red ones or whatever, even a clunky super PAC is better than no spend at all. You want to have it happen.
And having a super PAC that actually commits to a ground game is really hard to come by these days. That's not sexy stuff.
Right.
Having a super PAC that just does digital advertising and email acquisition, that's not sexy stuff.
Right. You had Bob Mercer, of course, who was very focused on the digital stuff. So you might have a donor who has an interest.
That's right. That's how these get spawned in different directions. Right. They found a way, and I don't know how easy or hard it was, but they found a way to really be at the right place at the right time for us when I was worried that maybe it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
But they were good and solid all the way through.
What was the deal with Huckabee? Huckabee, there's some Cruz Huckabee feud or something. Maybe it's only on Huckabee's side of the equation, but is there backstory to that?
I know Mike and Janet real well. I know David and Sarah and the whole crew. My read is that, first of all, they just come from a different worldview in politics. I mean, Mike came up as a lieutenant governor and had evangelical but kind of bigger government thoughts outside of evangelical lane. And then he saw that he was Iowa's guy. And when you go up there and start fighting for state senators and county commissioners hand to hand, that's one of the first things we saw when we got into this, is that how strong Walker was, then how strong Carson was, and then how strong Trump was. We were actually fighting for voters by name with Donald Trump. We never fought with that with Mike. There were very few people that I ever thought, we're going to lose him to Huckabee. And in fact, if we were going to lose him, we wanted to lose him to Huckabee because he didn't have anything else going. Right. And I think that he probably has this opinion that we took it from him.
You stole,
and it didn't.
We would get these midnight calls at the Jeff Super PAC. Hey, I can't tell you my name, but it rhymes with Buckabee. It wouldn't really be him, but it would be somebody. I need you to put $50,000 in an envelope and send it to, I could do why? Cruz must be stopped. Wow, there's a little bit of something going on there between those guys. Ted,
it happened at a homeschool event. You can always tell in politics, I think probably in life, what somebody thinks of you by how their wife treats you.
Yeah.
And Janet was on Mrs. Huckabee was on a panel with Ted at a homeschool event. And I watched the reaction, and it was a dagger. I mean, it was a knife, throat-slitting look. And I thought, that tells me about everything I need to know. We're in for, and it was one of the harshest ads ran against us was ran by them and their super PAC.
Yeah, I always feel sorry for the Huckabees or the Santorums who go from being God to goat.
Yeah.
Like it's my state, it delivered me. They remember the good news, the rocket fuel.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden they come back and we're my people, and all of a sudden the voters have moved on. I mean, take Rick Santorum, good guy, was a U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, huge state, hard to win for a Republican. I mean, really a meteor. Then he's written off for dead. He runs for president basically with a one staffer and some a tank of gas and comes out of nowhere to do really well and almost, take off completely in the primaries, back again. And, he's got to be thinking, oh, don't worry, it'll come together like it did last time, because he's got faith. He's lived the miracle.
Yep.
And the great God of miracles said, no way, sorry, you're done.
Yep.
And it just, you think about how hard that must be. I can get why a Huckabee or somebody would be a little cranky.
Yeah, well, and it can happen to anybody, right? I mean, you see it all the time. And sometimes they do work. Romney, McCain.
Yeah, no,
they can happen. But
it's
I think
fickle. It changes.
It is. And so I think that when it does happen, I mean, low be it for me to say anything critical about campaigns that I work on, but it can never be the voters' fault.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah, they suck, but they're always right. Yeah. You were saying how it changes quickly. I'll never forget, after Lamar ran in 95, Lamar Alexander, I was packing up my place in Nashville. I had a little apartment there near the campaign headquarters, driving back to D.C. And I'm driving past Knoxville, and I hear on the radio that they were doing the Dole endorsement event. He was, the nominee, and Lamar was endorsing him. I thought, wow, I knew this was coming, but I'm 20 minutes away. So I drive over. I figure I'll see it. I always love Bob Dole. And I show up, and I miss the event by 20 minutes. But they're upstairs in like a Holiday Inn somewhere in the Holiday Inn presidential suite in Knoxville. Yeah. So I go running up the elevator. I'm wearing like shorts and a T-shirt. I packed my car. And I see off the elevator door, the big double doors are open, and there's Dole and Lamar. And I'm like, oh, how you doing, guys? And I go strutting right up. In the blink of an eye, I'm slammed against a wall, spread eagle by the Secret Service, because I was used to the campaign where I could walk around. That's all gone. It's those guys. So Dole and Lamar laugh and kind of wave me over. And the great Howard Baker was there watching me kind of dust myself off after getting the 3-point grip from the Secret Service. And I'll never forget, Senator Baker said, it's a big change from being the windshield to being the bug.
Windshield to the bug.
So here we are. We are at the Republican convention. And I can tell you, I've been talking to operatives and some delegates as I've been tromping around here for my folks at NBC News. And I'm finding the mood here is somewhere between grim determination and Donner Party, depending on how you talk to. Nobody is upbeat. I don't know if you found them. I'd like to meet a few of the upbeat people because they're looking at the polls. They're looking at Trump's gaffes. Where do you think we are right now? And you guys are probably more connected to the delegate reality there, because I believe you probably have more Cruz people on the floor than anything else. Where do you think the heads are right now, the Pence pick? Where do you think we are today in this convention?
I think people are heartened by the Pence pick, and conservatives are. I mean, Mike is a full spectrum conservative and been a good governor and a good. I mean, I used to look at the Wall Street Journal. Well, let me tell you a better story. I worked for a congressman, chief of staff. We were a pretty political office. We won our race. We were one of the closest races in 2000. And so we come in, legislation. Like, we just got to raise money.
And which one was this?
This is Sam Graves.
Oh, Sam Graves. Yeah,
Missouri. Sure. And so we beat the incumbent's son. She retired. And we beat the son. And so I'd always say, he'd say, where's my vote recommendations? I mean, I don't know. Just go vote the way Mike Pence votes. That's was the measurement. If you wanted to be a conservative in Washington.
He was that guy in the House. He was the atomic clock.
It was just like the guy that you just follow. You don't need a vote recommendation. Just go vote like Mike Pence. So I think they're heartened from that. I think there is a little bit more excitement than maybe you're given credit for.
Well, I'm hanging around with all the rhinos,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
exactly. But boy, sure seem to be a lot of them here regarding Trump.
What everybody wants, really, not everybody. If they're not already signed up with Trump, what people are looking for is a reason to be for Donald and for him to come and earn the vote. Right. And I think that was a step that he took with Mike Pence, frankly.
Yeah, it sent the signal to probably the most muscular group of delegates in numbers on the floor, kind of the Christian conservatives.
Yeah, you matter.
That you matter, and I know you don't believe me on the issue, so I'll spend my biggest pick on that. Mm-hmm. So on the plus side, I think it worked.
Yeah.
On the minus side, that's an expensive thing to use your vice presidential. I mean, how many guys roll up to the convention in so much floor trouble, they got to use their vice presidential pick to tamp it down. But that's the reality he's in.
No, it is, but you look at the policy prescriptions that Don's laid out in this campaign, and let's just say since he's been the presumptive nominee, he's done two things. He's named Mike Pence to be his vice president, and he's announced who he would put on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Okay, that matters a great deal. I was just talking on TV the other day about the autopsy the RNC went through, walk away from social issues, and be for comprehensive immigration reform. We now have a candidate that essentially the entire Republican base is for him. If they're for him, they are because he gets to pick a Supreme Court judge. We know that.
And immigration.
Death, and we're building the wall. There's a lot of people in our party that get that wrong. They want to talk past voters instead of talk to voters, and voters don't agree. I mean, they want our guns and life protected.
Yeah, well, this will be the great debate if Trump doesn't win in 2020.
Yeah.
And, I'm on the other side of that argument, but I want to have the fight. That's why I'm not a Cruz guy. You guys know that. But I was for Cruz over Trump. One, because I think Trump's like a master criminal. I am not a Trump believer. But two, if Cruz came in second and had become the nominee by coming in first.
Yep.
Fair enough to test his theory. The missing voters. I mean, I've been hearing Ted stump for a long time.
At least shut us up, right?
Well, no, but you ought to get your day at
Prove
electoral court.
Yeah,
why not?
I agree.
It's a legit argument.
We always thought that it would be the two of us, and it would just be this battle royale, figure out which direction we're going as a party.
Right.
And, let's have it out. And it's too bad we don't actually
That's what political parties should do.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing.
It happens all the time. Like Howard Dean did it, right? I mean, Howard Dean did it. The party actually has to kind of do that to get stronger.
Right. And that's the problem with Trump. Trump is an aberration because of the media feedback loop, and he's getting in the way of the debate we got to have that now I think we're going to have in 2020. So I've got a question for Chris about the future of everything, but I'm going to start with either of you guys on, does Cruz run in 2020? I would bet pretty good money he does.
He's a 45-year-old runner-up for the presidency. I mean, there's probably another one in the barn somewhere. I don't think his Senate reelect will be a layup. I mean, I think the moderate Republicans could take a look at him. I think the Democrats would think that he, ought to take a poke in the eye. So that's on the 18, and that's a $20 million race. It's Texas, so he needs to focus on that, and he's doing so. But I think down the road, if you take a look at, it depends on who wins, depends on what the landscape looks like. But if he had a chance, I think to take a stand and put another run together, I think he would have that interest. And so
I think it would be hard not to if you're him.
Most delegates of the second place finisher since Reagan.
Yeah,
that matters.
We are the party of second then first.
And the other thing that's $92 million. I mean, one of the things about this whole floor fight they're having and about the rules is the rules of the primary process, which is tilted towards the advantage of somebody with money. And we raised more money than any. I got to get this. I believe I'm right on this. I believe we raised 20 to 30 million more than the next place. Giuliani and the Republican primary. Giuliani raised 61. That was the number one when we came into the race. Now I think Carson got to 59 or maybe 60, and we got to 92.
What was your average donation?
Like 58.
Yeah, so it's wide.
It's 1.6 million donations.
When I was a young guy, I was always looking at the future of technology. I still do, but nobody believes it because I'm an old guy now. I used to carry a K-Pro computer around like a sewing machine thinking I was so cool. So
you get a podcast now, so you're back in.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Right, exactly. I'm moving electrons. I've been doing it for a long time. But what do you think the campaign of the future looks like in 2020? I think mobile devices are going to be extremely big because we know so much and there's so much coming through that channel and the geo-targeting. I mean, but what if you had to sketch what the 2020, 2019, 2020 primary will look like, what do you think will be new and different or what will evolve?
Well, I think polling is going away. And that pains me to say as a pollster, but I've been sort of preparing for that for the last several cycles. And each year it becomes more and more difficult and more expensive to do good polling, is witnessed by a lot of the bad public polling out there.
Yeah, I totally
going
agree.
into Iowa, we had it was sort of interesting because I would get not angry, but concerned emails and phone calls from Jeff and Senator Cruz and some of the others because all the polling showed us down except mine. Thank God I was right, or I probably wouldn't have had a job on the Tuesday afterwards.
You were polling into a database you created and then modeling forward?
We built a modeled profile of what the electorate was going to look like. Unfortunately, that changed, and we were rescoring our file initially twice a week, and as we got closer to the election, every single night we were rescoring the entire voter file.
For the people listening, rescoring the file often means massive sample, much data to enhance it and to update it to tighten the model on a rolling basis.
It does. In a perfect world in Iowa, I would have been collecting 2,000 observations a night. Now,
we were doing a lot of that.
70% of that would have been IVR, and the rest of it's live to sell. But I couldn't get that many in Iowa because people weren't answering the phone.
Yeah, we had the exact same because we were doing the massive IVR to tweak our file for the modeling too. And the caucus is hard. Every campaign is calling them to drag them to the Santorum event.
Exactly.
And then the cheap campaigns can afford robocalling just to drive people crazy because it's the only thing they can afford. board. And so even the IVR polling, which is a great brute force weapon.
It's brute force instrument, yeah.
It's hard to do when it's a limited universe like that.
It is. We were adding some social in there for trying to find other ways to collect data, and that was what we were getting to it. So yeah, I think mobile devices, the ability to collect more data per individual. We had somewhere between 5,000 to 7,000 pieces of third-party data that we were appending to every single voter. I think as mobile devices proliferate and privacy laws are relaxed, which I think make it better for the voter, and I say that with truth. I mean, what do you want to do? Do you want to get your Google search on the first hit, or do you want it to go 7 pages in? And the same thing is true for how you get information for voting, I think. I also think one of the things that we played with this cycle that I don't know that we got right, and I want to really work on perfecting in the next few years, is cognitive technology, data, understanding how people make decisions. And so we played with that. But probably the one thing that I think we led on, and we did more of than any campaign, certainly on the Republican side, and I've had this confirmed by who we bought it from, was digital. We spent somewhere between 20 to 30% of our budget on social and Google and just overall digital advertising. And that was a big component. I mean, to move and for the Jeff Rose of the world to say, all right, I'm willing to roll back and spend this much less on television and put that into digital really is, you're taking a gamble because people have not done that before on the Republican side. Right. And I think we were able to prove that it was effective. We won the youth vote overwhelmingly in several states, and it had a big impact. If we'd sat down a year ago and I would have told you Ted Cruz was going to win the youth vote in 19 out of 30 states in which there was exit polling done on it, I mean, you probably would have laughed at me, but we did, and I think that's because of our targeting.
No, the culture's definitely changing. I still think the problem is not so much the spend mix, which ought to be as high as it's growing to. It's developing digital creative that's more organic to digital rather than just take the TV message and slap it into digital creative.
Yeah, that really is the challenge. I mean, create enough collateral, because I mentioned 167 segments in Iowa that require 167 pieces of digital creative to target them effectively. That's where you get into challenges. We had 2 full-time graphic artists, and then we also had to outsource a lot of it, and we had our media firm and others. But it was, we were humming toward the end in terms of being able to build things out and target.
Well, the artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to get to the point where ads will become self-creating through instant internet feedback. So you'll be able to feed your data right into a creative box that'll then kind of create ads and test them against clicks. And, it's going to become pretty interesting. I want Hulu to set up a politics-only channel just to use for ad testing.
That would be very cool.
But it's all coming because we're finding the way to collect all this stuff, and it's going to be pretty cool. Eventually, we'll all have these Jurassic Park dinosaur ads where Abe Lincoln will be endorsing people in primaries. Where does it stop? But that's not our problem today. Thank you guys for doing this. Let me wrap up with I'm going to get off this name because even I'm tired of it, but the mega question. What do you think Trump's odds of winning the general election are as we stand today before the big defining events, convention and debates?
Well, let's see what Nate Silver started his rankings and had it at 20%. And now I think it's up to 35 to 37%. So I think that's about right. It's, he has on the Democratic side probably the one candidate that he can beat in Hillary Clinton. And I think the longer this election is about her, the more the odds increase for him. But he starts in a deficit for a number of reasons. And I'd say it's probably somewhere between 30 and 40%.
I think he wins. And
you do. You think we're looking President Trump? You're going to look smart after. We're going to put this in the vault.
I'm the only person. I feel like I'm growing another head out of my shoulder when I say it. But if you take a look at with the white working class that we've been hemorrhaging to Democrats for a long time. I mean, well, think about first of all this: if he increases white turnout by 3.1%, and he does 3.1% better than Romney did with them, he doesn't need a single Hispanic to vote for him. Now, that's not the way you should campaign. And I wouldn't suggest that, and I don't believe that's the future of our party either to do so. But if you're getting 72% of 70%, if he's got to keep the college educated, he's got to keep
college educated white women in Romney world, he's miles away from now. That's where he's bleeding really badly.
I think, in a way, I think this lowering the bar for either of them to get to 50, they actually only have to get to 45.
Mm-hmm.
That helps him. I don't know that he could get to 50.
Yeah.
But I think he can get to 45. I don't know that Hillary, the last piece of my analysis here, is that I don't know that Hillary can get north of 45.
Yeah, this is a fair fight. I saw that New York Times poll, and it's way too early to really care before the big events like debates and convention. But 40-40 ballot test and a national poll is really the country projectile vomiting both candidates. Because a bag of cement can do 39.5. My view, I'm more pessimistic because I think even with his outliers there, he's going to have outliers other places. And so I agree Hillary's his best shot, her problems, because she's such a gift to us that we may squander. Where can people follow you guys on Twitter, Jeff?
I'm at Jeff Rowe.
Chris?
At Wilson WPA.
All right, great. Well, thanks a lot for doing the podcast. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you.
See you on the campaign trail.
Thanks.
Radio Free GOP.
Well, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for telling your friends and tweeting about it. And thank the increasing number of you who are giving us great reviews on iTunes. That really, really helps us. So please do that if you can. Love it, hate it. Get on iTunes, put a review and a star rating there because that helps the Apple algorithm spread the podcast around. We still have not made the new and interesting panel on the iTunes store. I suspect payola, but we're working on that. And the more reviews that are posted, the more you help us get the podcast to more people. You can follow us on the Twitter, as the kids say, at Radio Free GOP. You can follow me at Murphy Mike. You can see me on NBC and MSNBC doing some commentary and the like. And again, you can email us your comments at comment@Radio Free GOP. In fact, we've got kind of a listener question I'd like to put out. When we started this caper, we thought we'd try to do these things down around 35 to 38 minutes to make them quick. We've gotten some feedback, make them longer, and we've failed totally to make our original time limit. Most of these things are coming in about 50 minutes. So, my question, should we keep around 50 minutes? Should we try to shorten this thing up, or should we make it a little longer, maybe get to that magical full hour? Love to know what you think at comment@radiofreegop.com. So with that, I hear the siren. It means the thought police are moving in, the Orthodoxy Patrol. I have to tell you, they're driving a little slower now. Even the party enforcers know this Trump thing is a dud, and I think they're a little shameful. That said, we still better escape, so off to a new undisclosed location where next week we'll be back talking polling data. And until then, thank you again for listening. Share the word. I'm Mike Murphy, and remember, victory will be ours.
This has been Radio Free GOP, the voice of the Republican resistance, with your host, Mike Murphy.